Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for coming to this talk. It's nice to see so many of you. Sorry that you haven't all got a seat. My name's James Leech. I'm the Future Pupil Programme Coordinator at the University of Law, and this is a talk on making pupillage applications count. So just a brief bit about me. I have recently finished the bar practice course. I've got my results just a few weeks ago. And in January of this year, I went through the pupillage application process and was fortunate to receive an offer of criminal pupillage, which starts next September at 9 chambers in Manchester. That is a pure criminal pupillage that I'll be doing. And in the meantime, whilst I wait for that to start, I'm spending this year working for the University of Law, going out and speaking to prospective barristers like yourselves. If you are not already a member of the University of Law mailing list, please do scan that QR code. That will give you information about any events that we've got coming up, courses, deadlines, particularly for things like scholarships, and any events that we're running as well. We quite often get quite prestigious external speakers to come in, and you can access those even when you're not a University of Law student. So, how many of you are applying for pupillage in this next cycle? The vast majority of you. Okay, no problem at all. And how many of you have already been through the process and unfortunately weren't successful? Okay, we spoke earlier, didn't we? Okay. So the first thing that you need to do, of course, is learn how to select your chambers that you want to apply to. Now, of course, the timing of this talk is quite convenient, given the fact that the pupillage adverts go live, I believe, on Monday through the Pupillage Gateway. So, of course, that may well be your first port of call, to look at who is hiring, how much they're paying, the areas of practice that they're recruiting into. You can also use websites like Legal 500, Chambers and Partners, particularly to see how chambers are ranked, and that may well feed into your decision. Now, I'd suggest that once you've identified a long list of chambers that you think may be of interest to you, that you go through what I like to call the baby junior test. Can anyone make a guess as to what the baby junior test might be? A lot of blank faces. Okay. So, you go onto chambers' websites and you look at those who have been hired or taken on for tenancy within the last 3 to 5 years. And there's several reasons why you might do that. You want to look for similarities with yourself, okay? So you may find that there is a chambers who only recruit Oxbridge graduates with a first-class degree, and you might not meet those criteria, okay? Perhaps that chambers will not be right for you. Maybe it's not a realistic place to make an application. You also want to look at whether that chambers fits where you see yourself in 3 to 5 years. So look at the work that those baby juniors are doing, look at the cases that they're involved in, and see whether that is the type of career trajectory that you also want to have. I think that is the most key element of picking which chambers to make applications to. Investigate chambers' culture, their diversity, their ethos. So look at, for example, whether they do outreach programs and that aligns with your values. Look at their websites, look at their blogs, their articles, their social media output, and see whether it chimes with the kind of place that you want to work at. Then you create a list of all of these sets, and you decide, you specify on this list things like the geographical location, the type of practice they're involved in, how they are accepting applications, so whether that is by way of the Pupillage Gateway or whether they are wanting an application form followed by a CV. Just make a note of that. Of course, make a note of the Pupillage Award. I'm sure that after all of your years of hard work, you want to be well rewarded. However, do not make that the primary consideration when deciding which chambers to apply to. Just make a note of it. And consider as well the approach to pupillage and tenancy. So chambers will generally, hopefully, specify on their website whether, for example, they intend for you to just have one pupil supervisor throughout your entire pupillage, several, and also consider whether chambers are taking on as many pupils as there is potential spots for tenancy. So really it's just that you need to meet a specified standard and then you will get tenancy. Or is it the case that they actually recruit twice as many pupils as there is spots for tenancy? Because of course that creates a very different environment throughout your pupillage year. Are you and your fellow co-pupils, are you all in it together, or are you actually trying to fight it out to get a spot for tenancy? And consider which of those suits you best. And then finally on this slide, although possibly the most important thing, rank your chambers. Okay? So put them in order of those which you would prefer to work at the most. Really important that you do that. There is not a vast amount of time to do pupillage applications. You may well know that you can do 20 through the pupillage gateway and as many as you want to off the pupillage gateway, but you probably have not got time to do 25, 30 applications. Rank them so that you spend the most time on those chambers that you really, really want to work at. I did this, and the only offer of pupillage I got was at my number one set. And I think that is no coincidence, probably because I spent the most time and probably put the most effort into that application. Treat it as a project. So get organized, create spreadsheets. As I said there, prioritize your favorite sets and complete those applications first. Once the adverts are out, you can look at, of course, the questions that chambers are asking you. Some, you may well find that there are two or more chambers that are asking you the exact same question, maybe even with the same word count. If that's the case, make a note of that because you can draft those applications simultaneously. Some chambers are very transparent with their marking criteria, so the selection criteria that they are assessing you against. Check chambers' websites to see whether they specify that. If they do, within your spreadsheet, hyperlink those criteria so that when it comes to drafting your application, you can refer to them very easily. We have our own on-demand platform which has recorded videos which go into far more depth about how to make pupillage applications than I've got the time to go through today. Also make use of other online resources, things like YouTube as well, okay, just to give you hints and tips about how to draft your applications. When the time comes to drafting those applications, please do stay on top of them. I suggest that you make separate folders for each chambers that you're applying to. Make sure to label your draft applications very, very clearly because every single year, students will send the wrong application to the wrong chambers. And that is a very quick way of finding yourself in the bin, essentially. Get every single application proofread. So never submit an application without having somebody look over it first. If that's somebody in your professional network, brilliant, particularly if they are a barrister. So that could be somebody that you've done a mini pupillage with, maybe a mentor. If you've got friends or if you've got family, for example, who are barristers, brilliant. Lean on them, use them. If you can't use a barrister, anybody else in your professional network, you can of course use your tutors. I imagine many of you are undergraduate students, so use your tutors, particularly if they are former barristers. At worst, friends and family members. But no matter what you do, get somebody to proofread it for you. And then track your progress in the spreadsheet. So when you've done your first draft, once you've had something proofread, second draft, submissions, and then of course, hopefully on to interviews as well, okay? Here are some examples of spreadsheets that you might want to use. So you can see in the columns there, marked very clearly, are these different criteria. The color-coded spreadsheet here goes on to do something else as well. There is a column here on the far left, which is whether or not the set is considered to be, for that student, a realistic application, an aspirational application, a highly aspirational application, or somewhat of a safe bet. And I'd suggest that you cast a wide net. So do not just apply to highly aspirational chambers, okay? You never know the standard of the competition that you are up against. So have a spread of those different categories and give yourself the best chance. These are some of the skills and qualities that you need to be able to evidence throughout your application. These are the skills and qualities of an effective advocate or a successful barrister. You may well know that possibly the most common question, or one of the most common questions, is tell us why you will be a good barrister, or what qualities do you think a quality barrister possesses? So these are the 8 core ones. We'll go through them one by one. So intellectual ability. It's probably no surprise to see intellectual ability here on this slide. Barristers must be able to be logical, analytical, think on your feet, to argue, and then also adapt that argument. If you've got an Oxbridge first, brilliant evidence for having intellectual ability, but that is not the only way of evidencing that. If you've got particularly high module grades, especially if they're within the practice area that you're going into, brilliant, put those down, especially if they are outliers compared to your main degree classification. If you've done very well in mooting or any other type of competition, please do use that to evidence that quality. Integrity will be tested in every single pupillage interview. Who here has had a pupillage interview so far? Okay. Were you asked a question along the lines of, tell us about a difficult ethical situation that you've been in and how you overcame that? Anyone get that question? Yeah? Okay. It's really common. You may not need to evidence that in your application, but please do think of how you would answer that question if it were to come up in interview. The reason barristers test that is because every day you face difficult ethical situations. Chambers need to make sure that you will act appropriately when faced with those scenarios. You must be able to work under pressure. The bar is highly pressurized. Everybody knows that. Last minute briefs, tight deadlines, spinning a lot of plates, all at the same time. Good ways of evidencing that are taking on lots of commitments. So if you have worked alongside your studies, if you've also been a member of a society committee, those types of things, okay? It's showing that you can organize yourself quickly, you can prioritize things, and that you can effectively time manage. You've got to be able to show commitment to the bar. Pupillage itself is like a 12-month interview. So chambers need to know that you will show up every single day, even if you've just lost a case, your dog's just died, whatever it is, okay? That you will show up and give top performance every single day. How you show that as an applicant is really taking every single opportunity that is possibly available to you. So again, mooting, pro bono, marshalling, as well as exposure to the profession. So as many mini pupillages as you can reasonably fit in will go a long way to showing that you are truly committed to this profession. You've got to be able to demonstrate sound judgment because every day you're making decisions which profoundly impact people's lives. Communication skills. You've got to be clear and concise in the way that you communicate with people. And you should be able to adapt your communication style dependent upon the audience that you are speaking to. So if, for example, you're going for a career at the family or criminal bar, the people that you'll be speaking to day to day, minute to minute, will vary massively, whether that's speaking to a judge or speaking to a lay client whose knowledge of the law is next to none. Just a quick note, when you are evidencing these skills and qualities, it does not have to come from a legal setting. So I know somebody that went and got pupillage and they evidenced their communication skills by saying that they worked in a pub. Okay? There is a lot of she was going for the criminal bar. There is a lot of crossover between who you are kicking out of a pub on a Saturday night and who might be appearing in Crown Court for a bail hearing on a Monday morning. She was able to say she developed these skills. She could defuse volatile situations to amicable conclusions. You've got to be able to show good interpersonal skills for many, many different reasons, but I'll pick on a few. If you are at the criminal or family bar, you are dealing with very, very vulnerable people. And they are dealing with you at perhaps the most difficult moment of their lives. So they have to be able to have trust in you. You have to instill confidence in those people. And the best way of doing that is by strong interpersonal skills. Another reason you might need good interpersonal skills. Who here, show of hands, wants to be rich? Yeah? Okay, I thought so. Solicitors instruct barristers that they like working with. The easiest way to become rich as a barrister is to have solicitors continually re-instruct you. You've got to be able to build professional networks, be able to leverage those relationships as well and maintain them. Oral and written advocacy, we'll split that into two. To evidence oral advocacy should be a bit easier, particularly if you're at undergraduate level. If you've done mooting, public speaking, debating societies, maybe you've done a lot of theatre, drama, that kind of thing, of course use that as your evidence. When it comes to written advocacy, that can be a bit harder to evidence at undergraduate level, but if you have been published, if you've done articles, if you've done blogs, anything along those lines, of course use that in your application. But the main way that your written advocacy skills are going to be assessed is by looking at your application itself. An application for pupillage is written advocacy. You are saying why you deserve that pupillage over all of the other applicants. So make sure as you are writing that it is persuasive, it is engaging, and of course that it is without error as well. This is what should be on your CV when making applications. Now, of course, you've got the pupillage gateway, you've got the set sections on the pupillage gateway, but remember that some chambers may want you to apply by way of a CV and a cover letter. And this is the order that your CV should be in for a bar application. Unlike a CV for perhaps any other job, you lead with your education, okay? So in reverse chronological order, so your most recent qualifications first. Remember that many barristers and thus markers will not have a first class degree. If you don't have a first class, that is okay. Most chambers want a 2-1 or above. If you do not have a first, I'd recommend specifying any modules where you have outperformed that final degree classification, particularly if they are relevant to the area of practice that you're going into. Then, scholarships and awards. So particularly if you've got an in-of-court scholarship, of course, put that down. They're highly prestigious. It's a seal of approval. You've stood in front of a panel of barristers who've asked you questions which are very, very similar to that of a pupillage interview, and you've performed well enough that they say, we think you've got what it takes, and even more than that, here's some money to make sure that you go and realise your dream. Lead with that, but if you've not got that, any other scholarships or awards, so Dean's Awards, perhaps you've got highest performing student within a module at university, get that down. Any other type of awards that you've got, particularly if they are academic awards. Then your legal experience, so minis, marshalling, court visits, that kind of thing. Don't just say, I went on a 3-day criminal mini with such and such chambers. That's fine, but then also specify what you learnt from that experience. There should always be some reflection, okay, as to what you've gained from the experience. Then, non-legal employment. So, remember, this could be working in a pub, right? That's fine. Put that in there. But join the dots for the reader and specify the skills that you learnt that transfer to a career at the bar, okay? So specify the transferable skills. Then public speaking and advocacy, so mooting, debating, mock trial, drama, music performance, anything like that. Put that in there. Then pro bono and voluntary work. And lastly, interests. Chambers recruit rounded candidates. They do not want legal robots, okay? They want people who they think got a bit of personality, that can interact with clients well. I know a story as to a Chambers that got down to 2 candidates for pupillage. And on paper, both candidates were exactly the same. They interviewed and got the exact same marks when they went through second round interview. Chambers gave the pupillage to the candidate that had a pilot's license. Why? Because they thought it was interesting, right? Things like that can really set you apart. I know somebody else that got pupillage because whilst they were constantly applying for pupillage, they wrote and toured a murder mystery play around the country, okay? So think about what sets you apart. What makes your application really interesting? You want the person who's reading your application to maybe put a bit of a nickname to your application. Say, oh, that's the pilot. We like the pilot, right? It makes you stand out amongst 300 or 400 other applicants. So think about what your sort of X factor is, I suppose. In terms of mini pupillages, hopefully you've all had some mini pupillages. You apply by way of application form or CV, and then you also do a cover letter. And I just wanted, now we've gone through the CV section, I just wanted to give a bit of insight into what should be on a mini pupillage cover letter, because Chambers don't tend to give too much guidance on what should be included. So I'd suggest that you start by saying what you are looking for and be specific. Don't just say, I want a mini pupillage. Say, I'm looking for an intellectual property mini pupillage focused on fashion law, okay? So something which anybody picking up your application can see, am I even the right person to read this application? Should it go to another member of Chambers? Have we even got a space for a student to come along and do that type of mini? Then give a snapshot of where you are in your journey. So say, I am a third year undergraduate student. I'm the first year of the BPC, whatever it is, okay? The reason for that is that Chambers will mark you differently depending on how far through your journey you are. They expect far less legal work experience from someone who's a second year undergrad than they do someone who's 3 years post-bar course. So give a bit of a snapshot, maybe add a bit of colour to that. So if you've done loads of minis, you're the president of the Law Society, you're working as a litigation paralegal, something like that, okay? So I might have said in my first year of BPC, I'm a first year bar, I'm studying the bar practice course part-time, I'm currently in my first year, I'm working full-time as a litigation paralegal, okay? Just a little snapshot. Then you go on to answer 3 questions with 3 paragraphs. The first question is, why do you want to be a barrister? So explain that in your first paragraph. The second is, why do you think you would be a good barrister? Remember those core qualities that we spoke about earlier, those 8 core qualities. Think about which 2 or 3 of those you've got in abundance and those which you can evidence. Never just make a claim to have a quality. Back it up, okay? So I'll be a brilliant barrister because I've got fantastic intellectual ability as evidenced through such X, Y, Z. And then in the last paragraph, you state why you want to do a mini with that Chambers. And we'll go through in a second, perhaps how you might answer that question. So tell them what you want, give them a snapshot, paragraph 1. Second paragraph, why do you want to be a barrister? Third, why will you be a good barrister? And fourth, why do you want a mini at that Chambers? No more than 1 page long, ideally double-spaced if you can. Now I'm putting this up there, this isn't just me being arrogant, okay? This is me showing you a little bit of my CV, because the first year of making pupillage applications, I wasn't successful. In fact, I was wildly unsuccessful in making pupillage applications my first year. I did not get a single interview. So this was in January of 2024. And you can see on the left there, that was my profile when I went into those applications. So when I didn't get a single interview, I had to do a bit of self-assessment and think, well, what was I missing from my application? Again, what could I do that would make me stand out? So I realized I didn't have any real legal work experience. I thought that might be something that should really help me. I hadn't done anything to really set me apart. So I had relatively good grades. I'd won some scholarships. I'd done some mini pupilages. But as you probably know, unfortunately, that's kind of just the standard. That's the bar to entry for getting pupillage applications. You need to do something above and beyond that if you can. So I realised that I hadn't won a big competition. Okay? And in truth, I didn't really understand the process. So by the time I came to my second year of application, these were the things that I had changed. I was now working as a litigation paralegal. I'd taken on some more minis. I'd won another prize. I had my first year bar course grades, which I think really helped me because I did the bar course part-time. Second year of applying, I had my criminal grades and I was going for a criminal pupillage, which I think probably helped. I won a national competition and I just had a lot more legal and commercial knowledge. And the last point on there, which is probably, I think, the deciding factor in having a lot more success second year, was that I used the careers service at the University of Law. So I used their CV workshop, they did a CV review, they did an application review, and then when I did start to get interviews, they also did several mock interviews for me as well. So use every single resource which is available to you. And the second year, once I'd added these things, I was far, far more successful. I went from having no interviews to having 8 first-round interviews in my second year of applying. So do a bit of self-reflection. See what you're missing. So we're just going to answer or go through the 3 most common questions for applications. The first is, why do you want to be a barrister? So all of you in this room will have some initial spark that made you decide that you want to pursue or at least explore this career. That might be you watched Suits, okay? It might be that you read a book, watched a film. Maybe you were represented by a barrister, did a mooting competition. It could be anything along those lines, okay? That is the first building block of this answer. You do not just say, I want to be a barrister because I read To Kill a Mockingbird when I was a child and it stuck with me ever since, right? But you can use that as your first sentence. That is fine, okay? It's a genuine spark. Perhaps how you'd answer if a friend asked you or a family member. But then, more importantly, you need to go on to do 2 things. You must show that you know what a barrister does. Then you must explain why you want to do those things. You show that you know what a barrister does through exposure to the profession. So mini pupilages, court visits, marshalling, anything like that. And draw on specific experiences that you've had. Okay? Then, now that you've demonstrated that you know what the daily life of a barrister in your chosen field is actually like, you then say why you want to do those things for the rest of your career. Okay. So I'll give you my example. I shadowed in a case. It was a domestic violence case. The complainant complied with the court and complied with the CPS and the police throughout the entire process, got to the door of the court on the day of the hearing and ran away. She did not want to be cross-examined. She didn't want to be in the same room as her attacker. I then watched the barrister I was shadowing try to coax her back to court, look to put in emergency special measures, quickly negotiate with the judge, negotiate with the CPS, the defense counsel. That is a very, very typical experience in the daily life of a criminal barrister. These things happen constantly, okay? So I didn't just have some sort of rose-tinted view of what the profession was like and ensuring that everybody got justice or something along those lines. I chose an experience which shows this is the kind of thing I'll actually do day to day. Anybody reading my application, hopefully that would resonate with them. And then I explained the fact that I wanted to do this job because I liked the fact it was so unpredictable, that it was fast-paced, and that there were many different aspects to the role. I watched the barrister that day not only be an advocate, but perhaps be a counsellor and a social worker as well. And those are the kinds of things you do need to do as a criminal barrister. So showing that I knew what the daily life of a barrister was, and then explained why I want to do all of those things. Okay? Does that make sense? Brilliant. Why you'd be a good barrister is talking about those core qualities. Okay? So evidencing them all the time. Read the first sentence. I am a passionate defender of women's rights. Anybody reading that in an application what does it really tell them? It doesn't really tell them a lot. It tells them some belief you've got, some sort of ideology, but it doesn't tell them what you've done about it, how you've demonstrated that you truly do have that passion. Remember, don't make claims without evidence. Compare that to the second paragraph, where, because this person is a passionate defender of women's rights, they've volunteered with the National Centre for Domestic Violence for 3 months. Okay? They've actually gone and done something about it. Then use the STAR method. So hopefully you're all familiar with the STAR method, where you answer questions in the situation, then the task that presented itself to you, the action that you took, and the result. You can also say that you can also use that as reflection as well. Okay, so what you learned from the experience. So you'll see there, I volunteered, one client presented with this issue. These were the actions I took, A, B, C. What happened with it? The client's issue was passed on. And what did I gain? I developed client communication skills and a comprehensive understanding of the plight of abused women. Okay? It's a much more comprehensive answer. Anybody reading that will see you've actually acted on this passion, you've had an experience, and what you learned from it. And then the last core question is, why this chamber? So read this from left to right. On the left is probably the most sort of powerful experiences that you can draw on. If you've had experience with the chambers, like a mini pupillage, then of course leverage those. If you've had any other interaction with them, like perhaps at an event like today, you've done webinars, networking, anything like that, please do put that in your application. Okay? It's much better to say, I want to work at your chambers because I spoke with this person at the Pupillage Fair and I found out this about how you structure your pupillage. For example, that's much, much better than saying, I read about you in Legal 500. Right. If you've not done that, move to the next one, experience and skills in chambers areas of practice. So you can draw on mini pupillages that you've had with similar chambers who are within the same practice area. That's fine. You can explain why you like that and you know that they're heavily involved with that kind of work. If it's not that, but you do have, let's say you volunteered at a refugee charity and you know that that chambers does a lot of work in modern slavery, for example, you can clearly link the dots there. Moving on to the third bubble there, references to chambers cases. Be careful, word of warning. If you start quoting chambers cases, you will be quizzed about those heavily when it comes to interview. So make sure that you know them inside out. That means reading the full case report as well as looking at any commentary around that. Okay? You will be put on the spot. I would suggest to you, bit of a trick, remember that baby junior test? You can look at the cases that those pupils, or those tenants, sorry, are involved in 3 or 5 years down the line, and you can draw on those cases to say that you like what chambers are involved in. Because, one, as a bit of a cheat, they're not widely reported. There's not going to be loads of commentary on them, and your knowledge before you go to interview does not need to be vast, right? It's a bit of a cheat code there. Secondly, you can link that to where you see yourself in 3 or 5 years' time. Because you can say, I can map that career trajectory. Those are the kind of cases that I want to be involved in. I did exactly this in my pupillage interview. Somebody 3 years post-call was already being led in a £52 million multi-handed drugs conspiracy. And I said, that's exactly where I see myself. And I like the fact that this chambers will give me the opportunity to be involved in cases like that so early in my career. And then lastly, any features of chambers that attract you and why. So you might be drawn to a particular geographical location. You can definitely squeeze that into your application, especially if it's something where you've got a big connection to, like if all of your family live there. So for example, I grew up in Cornwall and I applied to a chambers in Plymouth and I told them that, I didn't get very far, but I tried. I told them that I knew about all of the specific criminal issues that Cornwall is struggling with, like county lines, drugs, smuggling and tractor theft, all right? Those kinds of things. And I said I wanted to give back to the community that raised me. So you can put those in, but please work from left to right. Those will be your strongest applications and they kind of get weaker as you move over here. These are some of my tips for persuasive drafting. Be factual, be evidenced, be well evidenced. Use simple language. Do not write with a thesaurus for every single sentence, okay? Don't be too fluffy. Be straight to the point. Start with your strongest points. Don't start with your weaknesses. In fact, don't even mention your weaknesses in an application. Proofread, as I mentioned earlier. Omit words that you do not need. So go back over your applications with a critical eye. Assess whether every word, every sentence is adding to your point. And if it's not, get rid of it. You're already fighting against pretty tight word counts. Get feedback before you apply and after your application as well. So if you've been unsuccessful, get somebody to take a look over it, of course. Show character. Be interesting. And to add to that, don't try to fit the mold of what you think a barrister should sound or look like. Okay? Be yourself. There's no point in putting on an act in your application because when you get to interview, it will all fall apart when you look very different or sound very different to the person in the application. And you're potentially applying for a career that you'll be in for the rest of your life. So you're not going to be able to keep up an act for that long. All right? Use the STAR method and avoid excess adjectives, exaggeration, and cliches as well. And lastly, remember who the reader is. It's probably a very tired barrister, okay, who does not want to sit there and work out what you're trying to say. Just be straight to the point with your sentences and with your advocacy. Of course, make sure your spelling, punctuation, and grammar is perfect. These are some tools that you can use. These are some common mistakes that people make, the difference between practice and practice, advise and advice, judgment and judgment. Make sure you get chambers' names right. Okay. I know that sounds really simple, but every year, again, people say, why do you want to work at Henderson's? Well, I'd love to work at 3 Paper Buildings because of this, right? Don't make that mistake. Let your personality come through. Quality over quantity. Don't try to hit some arbitrary number of applications. Instead, rank your chambers, like I said, and see how far you get down that list. Don't move on to your next one until you are thoroughly happy with the application that you've drafted. Most people that I know who got pupillage, did in the region of 8 to 10 applications, not just trying to hit the maximum on the gateway. Of course, get some feedback. Word counts aren't a target. If you've got a 250 word limit and you've answered that question in 200 words, that is no bad thing. Barristers are succinct. If you can be the same in your application, great. Format correctly. Think about your bullet points, numbering, subheadings, and structure. Try to make it as clear as you can. And of course, tailor your application to the specific practice area every single time. These are some useful resources. So you've got the employability service at the University of Law. Obviously, if you're a ULaw student, then use it. If you're not yet a ULaw student and you want to apply for a course, you can begin to use our employability service as soon as you've accepted a place. You don't have to have started the course. If any of you don't know about the website Pupillage and how to get it, please go and do a Google search. It does what it says on the tin. It's probably the most useful website for this kind of thing. Of course, you've got YouTube, targetjobs, ULaw, and Chambers websites. Various Chambers websites have pupillage guides as well. Look at podcasts. So I particularly recommend things like the Law in Action podcast. If you're not already subscribed to that, then please make sure that you do, particularly before your interviews. And if you were a student of ours, then you could also get onto the BAR mailing list, which just tells you about opportunities and resources on a regular basis. Please do look at our on-demand platform, which has got videos that go into far more depth than I can with you today. That is open to everybody. You don't have to be a University of Law student in order to access that. And that is all from me. So thank you very much for watching. Again, if you'd like to join the mailing list, then please scan the QR code. But thank you very much for your time.